In the previous video, we looked at how Ultra Electronics are using Comply Pro for the specification development of their systems for their Oman Airports contract. In this video, we're going to look at a little bit further at some proof of concept work for how Ultra Electronics could use and record some change management and interface logging against these developed SR specifications. So, whereas before we looked at the SR specification and looked at how it was mapped back to user requirement specifications and possibly linked viewpoint documents as required, we'll see that there's also some additional tabs to the right hand side for linked interfaces, and as we're going off the screen we'll see a little set of arrows, also linked changes. So these linked interfaces and changes are managed under separate activities in the system. So if I click through and along to, firstly let's look at the interface log. When we do this, we'll see a couple of interfaces that are recorded in a log to the left hand side. So when I select one of these interfaces, we can see some details associated. We can see who the owner of this interface is, what the detail about the interface is. So for example, the camera of the CCTV must cover the door on the installation of the door alarm. So that's going to require a link and an interface between several specifications, namely between the door control access systems and the CCTV systems. Because these are different systems in the set of specifications that are being developed, then there's the requirement to link together separate statements within each of these systems requirement sets. So if I scroll along, I'll see I've also got the capacity to link against a viewpoint document that could be being held in the system that could have some further detail about the interface, or it could be the document sent to Ultra by the client requesting this interface, or possibly a change that we come on to in a minute. And I can see different SR items that are required as part of this interface. So I can see there's two in each case here, but there could be as many interface requirements as necessary. So if I want to record a new interface into the system, I can insert a row into the interface log. I can enter my new interface here. I can apply an owner against this if I wish to. Then I've got a status flow here, so I can work on this in a draft state, but then I can propose this at such time as I want the system manager to review the interfaces that I'm imposing onto their systems. And I can also now go through by highlighting this particular interface statement to the left hand side. I can review, in this case it's a proof of concept, 3 separate systems on here. Indeed, all 40 systems even would be referenced by link tabs to the right hand side. So I can view the full specification for each of the 40 separate systems. So here's the airport information broker. I can find the different statements within here, and I can right click and I can link to the SR. I can also find a different and link the interface to this existing SR statement also. So you see I can build up the interface requirements to the left hand side from the specifications being shown to the right. So indeed there could be items that are being affected by this interface in the CCTV system, so I can find items in here as well, and I can indeed here, as you can see, build up the requirements that are affected as part of this particular interface on the left hand side, simply by reviewing the specifications, right clicking and linking the item back across. So now I've done this with my interface, what impact has that had back in my system, my system itself? So if I look back to my dashboard now, let's view the dashboard now in an above below format, just so that it gives us a wider screen area to look at from a column perspective. I can look at the airport information broker SRD, and I can indeed see, if I scroll up or down, I can see and find places where each of the SR statements has got, in which case, a change that's been logged and what status it's at, and indeed an interface here which has been logged and has got a status being displayed also. So we know that our SR item is linked back against the UR item that it's satisfying, but now it's also being potentially linked against a viewpoint document, but also now against changes and interfaces. So this helps us with our traceability, and it helps us to discover if there's any considerations, such as, for example, when we come to make a change to this statement, we would also want to know, well, what else is dependent upon this. So we can see here that there are interfaces and the stage at which that interface is at. So this interface has been proposed, whereas this one has been accepted by the system manager for the airport information broker. So a change to this statement would need to consider the interface that's been imposed on it. And because interfaces are usually managed in a separate set of interface requirements by potentially the interface manager, then it's quite relevant for the systems manager to be able to review the dependencies upon his system quite readily alongside his set of derived SRD items. So we've seen a little bit of the change display here, but quite similarly, the change log, if I click across to it, works in exactly the same way, in that I've got a log where I can record changes that have been requested or imposed, and like I say, in which case submitted here, but once again we have a workflow that we can follow through where I'm indeed submitting them here. But if I was to log into the system as the system manager, I can then accept or reject this change, and ultimately it can be incorporated as well. So ComplyPro can lock down this status into a workflow, and the workflow can then allow this status to be progressed dependent upon the role that you're in and dependent upon the position it's already at. So for example, to go from draft to submitted, but then once it's submitted it can either be accepted or rejected by X type of role of user, and then once it's been accepted it can then be incorporated. So that is how change is managed in the system. It works in exactly the same way as interface. So a particular change request can be added. It can then be linked in the same way as we did for the interfaces against the particular requirements that this change might have effect. So for example, we see here that a client requires 5 additional e-gates. That's not just going to affect one statement within a particular system. It's going to affect multiple statements. In the e-gate might require new VDUs, new desks, new positions, new cameras, new this, that, the other. So all of the items at which are going to be affected by this change need to be linked by reviewing the specifications to the right. Once we've done that, then our change can be progressed through its status flow and then closed out or incorporated if that's indeed possible. Just like we've already seen, back in the dashboard and back into the SR item, I can see, let's scroll back up to the top, and we can see where changes have been imposed against particular statements, and indeed they've just been submitted here and not actually any accepted or incorporated at this point in time. Thanks very much.